Palantir has just made a hire, and they have officially hired Mike Gallagher, who is a former. He was a politician. This is his first defense job. He was a member of the House of Representatives representing Wisconsin's 8th congressional district for the Republican Party between 2017 and 2024. So he was in Congress for 7 years. He's 40 years old. He's a Republican. And this is his first, defense consulting job. So there you go. And he is indeed a China hawk. This is probably why they hired him. This is not a guy he's not fond of China. Let's just say that he's not a guy who likes China. Let's go to the article right here and let's get into this. Why it matters. Gallagher is an outspoken critic of China, and he will reinforce the company's pick a side mentality. It's Gallagher's first job in the defense sector. He succeeds Doug Philippone, who built the unit and will stay on as an advisor. Word of his hiring circulated first earlier this year, but the company did not confirm until now. He began in June. In Palantir, you have a rare leading technology company that is unapologetic in its defense of the West and its belief that America is a force for good in this world and worth defending against our enemies, Gallagher tells Axios, adding that the private sector innovation can help prevent World War III. We need to marry both tech and hardware, bits and bending metal. Wow. So pretty much echoing Karp's statements. Karp, who's known Gallagher for years, recently told the New York Times that the U.S. will likely fight a sprawling war with China, Russia, and Iran. That scaring the crap out of your advocacies is the right move. I like it. I don't know much about this guy, but I like it so far, just knowing that he's against China and he is at least sort of unilateral in terms of his support of Western values. This is the type of people you need working at Palantir. These are the types of people you need working from the defense space. The obvious reason why this is good for investors is that investors need someone who is connected to the political landscape. So Palantir, remember they introduced that federal advisory board back in 2022? I don't even know if that's still active right now, but the whole point of that, from my understanding, was to lobby politicians essentially and get deals done, right? And every big tech company has to do it. When you've got someone who used to be in the House of Representatives for 7 years, he has connections. He understands the political world. If Palantir is bidding for a contract that they need to get, he knows people that he can probably talk to hopefully get the deal done. These are the types of people you want as strategic hires. And whatever they're paying him, if he can land us more deals, I'm sure he's going to be worth a lot more over the long term.
Gallagher, who left the House back in April, joining Palantir to lead the company's defense business. Mike joins us now from Wisconsin. First, right here on Squawk Box. Good morning to you. I can't.
I've never heard him speak. For those that haven't heard him before, maybe you guys have heard him. Let me know your first impression in the chat, and I'll give you my first impression. But this is really my first time listening to the guy and seeing how he talks at all.
I can't call you congressman anymore, but I can't ask you why you decided to take this job.
Well, I've dedicated my life to defending the country, first in the Marine Corps and then in Congress. My mission is to prevent World War III, as we've talked about before. With Palantir, I have an opportunity to continue that mission in the private sector. We have war in the Middle East. We have war in Europe. We have a Cold War in the Indo-Pacific that risks turning hot if we don't get our act together and get off this path of complacency. And I firmly believe that Palantir is at the leading edge of deterrence in the 21st century, the era of software-defined warfare, where on the modern battlefield, countries that don't leverage advanced algorithmic warfare systems are simply unilaterally disarming. I would further say that in communities like mine, a manufacturing community in Northeast Wisconsin, Palantir is at the leading edge of revitalizing America's industrial base. And finally, I would say, as we've talked about multiple times, in chairing the Select Committee on China, I came to realize that the true divide on national security is not really between Republicans and Democrats, but rather between Wall Street / corporate America and normal America. And too often, corporate America was simply unwilling to defend American values from Chinese Communist Party.
I like this guy, dude. I fuck it. For his first live interview, he says, fuck the corporations that don't actually take a stance on like real issues, especially going against the CCP. I like him. I like, he's not afraid. He's not sugarcoating it. He's not afraid. He has a stance. He's giving it out in the open, and he's saying what he wants to say.
Aggression and transnational repression. But with Palantir, you have a company that is unapologetic in its defense of the West and its belief that the free world is a good thing and worth fighting for. I think it shows that you can succeed without selling your soul in the process.
Mike, well, let me ask you two questions. One is, you were the House Select Committee chair on competition with China, and there were a lot of lessons that came out of that. Do you have more hope or less? And did you think you had the power to change things there, or did you decide ultimately that there was no power to do that in that role?
No, I felt like I had the best job in Congress, and we got a ton done. In fact, the last bill I got passed, I think, was one of the most consequential of the 118th Congress, the TikTok bill. And really, I was revitalized in my belief that Republicans and Democrats can work together to get big things done. I think the challenge we face is that we have an adversary, which is not just a military threat, it's also an economic and technological and ideological threat. So we're having to flex a lot of muscles we haven't flexed in a long time. And we have too many people that are unwilling to even utter the words new Cold War for fear that some sort of Voldemort phenomenon will take place and suddenly we'll summon some evil powers. We just need to get the energy and alacrity and creativity and wage that Cold War with that same energy we would wage an actual hot war. And that's the business we need to be in, preventing war. And too often, I think China has lulled us into a false sense of security.
Now, here's the thing, right? So this is what I think people misconstrue about Palantir and the defense industrial complex. A lot of people think, oh, Palantir wants a war to happen, and that's good for them. That's not the argument that I hear Palantir make, or I hear people like him make. Their argument is, how do we prevent a war? Like, no one wants a war, so how do we prevent it? And the only way to prevent it is to have defense. At the end of the day, like, if you don't understand that, I feel like you're stuck in a teenager mentality, because war is brutal and ruthless. And the only way to stop it is to make sure that people are so scared of you, that China is so fucking scared of even thinking of invading Taiwan, that they won't try. And because of the difference in values that we have, China, Russia, they start to go off the edge. And so unless you have a really strong defense system with companies, not like Google, that won't defend the United States in 2019 and give the Project Maven contract to Palantir, and that Eric Schmidt, the former CEO, called them out on because they have no backbone, but yet they're working in China to make different AI labs, but they won't defend the United States. You need companies that take a stance like Palantir. As Sanjay says, Palantir's mission is deterrence, not war. And it seems like Mike Gallagher is pretty much aligned on those values.
So one of the things you just said before was this idea that you think corporate America has actually played a role in preventing, frankly, the U.S. government from doing more as it relates to China. Palantir has been very outspoken on these issues. Having said that, Palantir does lots of business with corporate America today.
Yeah, I think Palantir is showing the way forward, which is that it's going to be increasingly difficult for companies to maintain their manufacturing presence in China. And I think increasingly what we see is that Xi Jinping is expediting his plan to decouple from the West. So what is the solution? We all need to work together. We can't just demonize big tech. I can't just sit here and demonize corporate America. We have to lay out an affirmative, positive path where we, working together with our closest allies, the Aussies, the Brits, key countries in the Indo-Pacific, pool our technological resources, our human resources to outcompete and win this competition and prevent war in the process. I think that's the path forward. Again, I think Palantir is playing a key role. And I think we need to revitalize our entire defense industrial base and make it easier for new companies to get into that space and cross the valley of death. Palantir is one of the few who's actually done it successfully and broken through the DoD status quo mindset and the bureaucracy that oftentimes makes it too difficult to do business.
The argument he's making there, I think, is very important, right? So corporate America has this sort of ideological agenda in terms of how they think of business, and then they have how they think of their exporting their values. A lot of that goes to shit overnight when Russia invades Ukraine, and a lot of your supply chain ends up being in Ukraine, right? Like, how do you navigate that situation? And so I think Palantir's argument to corporations is not only do you need to have an ontology with your data that is able to flip things up overnight if something chaotic happens, but also you need to be questioning how you're processing a lot of the very essence of your manufacturing, for example, in places that don't agree with your values in the first place. And this is someone who seems to be echoing those statements, who can actually talk to corporations and then obviously government officials to make them think differently about those unique issues.
I wanted to ask you actually about TikTok, ByteDance, and the bill that you helped pass, which pushes or presses ByteDance to sell TikTok by, I believe, January 19th, 2025. Obviously, there's lots of appeals going on in court. How do you think that is going to end?
I think the bill will survive any legal challenges. If for no other reason than we spent months and months working through a draft, inviting technical assistance and feedback from the administration. This was the product of multiple iterations. It was a very thoughtful process. In fact, it's exactly how the legislative process should work. And you had the legislative branch working with the executive branch. I'm very confident it will survive any legal challenge. And listen, the outcome we want to see is that the Chinese Communist Party allows ByteDance to divest TikTok away from its core business. And therefore, you could have an American company, European company, some conglomerate assume ownership. Users could continue to use the platform without the fear of espionage or coercion or propaganda that's infecting the platform right now.
So here's a question for you. Here is Congress saying this is a very dangerous platform. And yet you have former President Trump using the platform for his campaign, and you have Vice President Harris using the platform for her campaign.
This is the part, dude. This is the part I just cannot believe.
What does that say?
Democrat or Republican, how are Trump and Kamala both using TikTok, and they're both saying TikTok is like espionage, spyware stuff from China? Like, that part to me is actually insane. That's the type of stuff that makes you never want to trust these politicians, because they all hate, they all say one thing and do the other. Now Trump has been a little bit more bullish TikTok, but it is kind of crazy that at least Kamala, whose administration with Biden passed the TikTok bill, is now marketing her campaign on TikTok. Like, that to me is just insane.
About the danger.
Well, neither should be using the platform. I think it just shows that political expediency, the desire to win younger voters who are hyper online, is taking precedence over national security concerns. Now, that's the bad news. The good news is, I think my committee in Congress has shown that Democrats and Republicans took this issue seriously. If you look at the final vote tally, we got over 350 votes. I'm not sure anything else has commanded that level of bipartisan support. So I do think, notwithstanding the political exigencies of the moment, there are thoughtful members of Congress and the executive branch trying to do the right thing. And I will concede this is a very complex issue. It's bound up in a broader issue of cross-border data flows, foreign adversary control of social media. And so it's not just cut and dry, but we tried to be very nuanced in approaching a complex issue. So it's why I'm optimistic about the path going forward.
All right, so that's the interview we got. Shout out to John again, this Twitter account right here, getting us all the clips. I'll put their Twitter in the description. Please make sure to follow them if you want to get updated immediately on the clips that come out in regards to Palantir, and also just a lot of other tech companies, because they're really quick to get those clips, and that's how we were able to watch this today. Now, here's the thing on the TikTok bill. Look, I agree with a lot of you guys in the chat saying that TikTok is where the people are. That's where you have to be to use TikTok. I get that. Totally understand it. Like, you have to be on the platforms where people are to be able to access their attention. I have zero problem with that. My problem is with the hypocrisy of it. Like, that's the biggest issue I have. If you're Kamala Harris with Joe Biden banning TikTok, saying that it is malware, and it's the CCP is using all that data to then do horrible things, you can't be contributing to that data. Now, you have to ask yourself a question. Do I want to get more young people to vote for me, or do I want to turn my back against a literal bill that I passed that says that TikTok is the worst thing on earth? And if you pick the other, that's fine. It just makes me not trust you ever on what you're saying, that on the legislation that you passed. And so that's the really weird part about it. It's like, you can't say that you hate TikTok and that it's horrible and that we need to get rid of it, and then use it just for your own selfish needs, right? Because the whole point is to take a sacrifice and not contribute to the platform, especially if your concern is that young people are getting manipulated on TikTok, but you're only on TikTok to access young people. You're contributing data to the CCP that can then use that data to manipulate against young people. So I don't know. I've never understood the TikTok thing. Personally, I don't think TikTok needs to literally be banned. I think that they need to get a new owner outside of the CCP, which is what the bill calls for. Now, will that happen by January 19th? Absolutely not, in my opinion. They said January 19th, we need to get a decision. Dude, there is no way in hell, in my opinion, that TikTok either is going to get banned or that it's going to get sold off to like Microsoft and that the servers are going to change overnight. I think this is going to be stuck in appeals for years. I think if Trump wins, he's probably going to reverse this, because Trump, we talked about this a long time ago, Jeffrey Yass, the owner of Susquehanna Group, has a $28 billion net worth. 21 out of that 28 billion is in TikTok. He has given a lot of money to Trump, given a lot of stock to DJT. He owns about 600,000 shares of Truth Social. So I don't think Trump will allow TikTok to get banned. But if Kamala wins, I still don't think TikTok's going to get banned either. Amit, what you're not realizing is that they're all hypocrites. Yeah, well, I mean, that's the thing. It's always hypocritical. And like, I can't be surprised that politicians are hypocritical, but it's just crazy to me, dude. They're like, we hate TikTok. Come follow us on TikTok. And I'm like, what, dude? Like, if you think TikTok is that amazing to be able to use to access people, then you think it's a great platform, then don't say you hate it. Just say you're going to use it and don't critique it. And definitely don't pass legislation that's going to critique it, because you obviously don't believe in it. But nonetheless, I think Mike Gallagher is incredible. Trump is on TikTok. Yes, Trump and Kamala, they're both on TikTok. Mike Gallagher, incredible. That was my first time really watching him. But China Hawk, he unilaterally believes in the West. He is echoing the same points that Karp echoes in terms of American manufacturing and how American corporations need to take a stance on things. And for investors, this really just means ka-ching, ka-ching, because if this guy has the right connections, he should be able to get us more deals. More deals means more government growth, and more government growth is better for Palantir stock. So at the end of the day, I think this is the right move. You need people like this. Whatever they're paying him, they're probably going to make a lot more off of his connections. And that's something very important.